you use it or not.
Hello, everyone. Thank you again for coming to my new installment of Women, Faith, Spirituality, and Lack Thereof. I am here with my friend in radical feminism, Maxi McNaughty. She is originally from the UK, now living in the Netherlands. Thank you so much for joining me, Maxi.
Thank you so much for inviting me. It's wonderful.
Mm-hmm. Right. So what is your faith and what are some beliefs, or if you call it a faith, or what are your beliefs? And tell me about, what your background in religion and things.
I have, this is one of your other questions, so I'll start off doing that. I was actually born and spent the first probably 5, maybe 6 years of my life in a Catholic convent for unmarried mothers. And then when I was maybe I'm not quite sure, probably 12 or 13, my grandmother got captured by the Jehovah's Witnesses. So we did that for a long time. I remember as a really quite a young child, at the beginning when I was really little, the masses were in Latin, and I thought that was wonderful. I loved that whole thing, and I can remember wanting to wear just all white, from everything. Do you know what I mean? And just loving the whole thing. Then at a certain point, they changed it, and it was in English. And it took a long time for everybody to do that. But as soon as it was in English, it lost all of its magic, because I was like, this is bullshit. So even as, there was this one point, and I can remember, and this traumatized me for years. It took me a really long time to be able to say this without starting to cry. But I can remember as a really young child, and, we left the convent when I was like 6, maybe 5.5. And I can remember going into the church, sneaking into the church. And when you're Catholic, you go in and you dip your hands in that thing with the holy water. I think
I've heard, yes.
It was this sponge. And I can remember taking the sponge out of that thing and putting it in my mouth and drinking all of the holy water and praying, please God, make me good from inside. And clearly
powerful.
He didn't.
Wow.
And when I remembered that, and I buried that memory, but when I remembered it, I found that so painful. The idea of this small child already, somehow told that there was something wrong, intrinsically wrong with them, something that would make any small child, and not so much that it was me. The fact that it was me kind of just explains so much other shit in my life. But just as an adult looking back at this desperate child, that took me, like a long time to kind of get to a point where I could actually tell people, share that without immediately starting to blubber, and just, but anyway.
Wow.
I can just remember at a certain point, just listening to this English, being in this space that I'd always wanted to go. Sundays were amazing. And just listening there and going, this is bollocks. This is utter bollocks. These people are horrible. The nuns are evil to most of the mothers. Priests are wankers. They are just nasty men. This is crap.
Wow.
And then I went to a couple of Catholic schools. My first Catholic school, when I was so junior school, you go from 5 to 11. We left when I was probably 8 or 9, but I thought that was an amazing school. The stuff that happened there, the way we were all I remember in the first week of school, we were taken to like the municipal buildings, and we were like, teacher said like, what's that up there? And there was, you know, it was like a plant and somebody's head and something weird. Is that another plant? And the teacher said, okay, that is the head of a black man, that is corn, and that is wheat, and I think it was like maybe gold or something like that. And he said that is what the wealth of not only this city, but this whole country is built on. And most of those things do not come from here.
Wow. I
Right.
was wondering where you were going with that head of a black man, but thanks. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
And he said, so everybody who is here because we built our wealth. So if any of the children in the class, or the boys who were from you know, like the Pakistanis, or the, you know, the people who came from the subcontinent of India,
Right.
that there were Irish people in the class, obviously, because it was, he said, all of these people are here. And he didn't call it colonialization and capitalism,
Right.
but you know, but like, however it was, he or she, however they phrased it, it was two teachers, however they phrased it, they were like, you know, everybody's here. There's, you know, everybody here is English. You all have an equal right to be in this country. You're all entitled to the same things in this country. And if anybody ever makes a comment about anybody on the basis of their skin color, they're immediately going home suspended for a week.
Wow. Wow. They took it very seriously.
Yeah.
Wow. So I guess that started you on a journey away from the church, or how?
Well, that, you know, but that was a Catholic, that was a Catholic
Right.
school, you know, but the teachers weren't necessarily Catholic. So, you know, but then by the time I went to, you know, and then, yeah, and it's just, so I just wanted to say that because,
Right.
but it was clear that I see my education as being, even though it was a Catholic school, I see that as being separate to the whole religious thing. And it was just, you know, like, you know, you have choir boys and the people who get chosen, and it was just really blatantly unfair. Everything
Right.
that the church ever said was just such blatant hypocrisy. And God didn't make me good from inside. So, you know, what the fuck was all of that about? You know, I just had this kind of a rage and then my grandmother at a certain point became involved with the Jehovah's Witnesses. And they're just not fucking fun, are they? They're just not fun, right? And we used to call it the jailhouse rock. And the good thing about it was you got to sing. We used to love singing, and I liked acting, you know, so you got to, you know, like, and I loved the acting bit.
Right.
You know, but it was just all restrictions, like only men can do this, and only this number of people are going to be saved. And it's like, well, what the fuck are the rest of us for?
Right. Exactly.
You know,
I've heard that.
you can't have this in you. And I was just a bit like, you know, and when push came to shove, all they ever did was take money from my grandmother. You know, everything costs money, right?
Yes.
You know, it's just like, this, you know, again, this is feeling of like, but then when I got pregnant, so there's a bit in between. So then when I was in my teens, we moved to an area where we were the only black family that lived in the town.
Wow.
There were two women who had mixed heritage daughters, but you know, they'd had nurses and doctors who came in for short periods of time for their training or whatever. But we were literally the first and only black family that lived in that town up until the time when I left, you know, which was about 6 or 7 years. And all of the, you know, the crappy racism that goes with people's ignorance, you know. So I then, you know, I got taken under the wings of a group of just like a kind of a witches group, you know. And so, and they basically trained me for probably around sort of like 10 years. I was going and still seeing them and doing stuff with them, and you know, them sharing knowledge with me, their insights. And one of the women came from kind of like a family tradition, like an Irish family tradition, which I don't know a great deal about, but I've met one other woman who says something similar. So the grandparent teaches the first child of the opposite sex
That's
passes
interesting.
on. So it goes from grandfather to granddaughter and grandmother to grandson.
That's
And it
interesting.
always skips it skips a generation.
I wonder why that is.
I have, you know, that, so it's really weird because this woman first told me about it, you know, like this, I got taught this by my grandfather and blah, 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 and this whole Irish thing. And then maybe 20 years later, you know, it must be like 10, 15 years ago, so one of my oldest friends, her partner, her ex-partner's sister is also doing healing and stuff like that. And, you know, it's a bit witchy poo. But she told me
Yeah.
exactly the same thing, you know? And then there was a Scottish woman and a Welsh woman, and they had both been taught by their grandmothers and mothers that this had all kind of passed down. And there was a French woman who did essential oils. So she talked to me a lot about the goddess religions and all the rest of that kind of stuff. So I'd started off with, you know, the Greek and the Roman myths. And you know that I was fascinated by them. I learned to read I could read, you know, I was reading my mum's books by the time I was 11. So, you know, because my life was so miserable, I was just reading all the time. And I loved the myths, but I was always a bit like, they're not good to women, you know. And then so this woman was saying to me, everything that you read there is about informing people that the world has changed, that all of the Greek myths, all of the Greek plays, you know, the oldest book that we know, Gilgamesh, they are all about indoctrinating people that the things that they think of as being normal, you know, the basis, everything that they understand as the basis of what life is now different. And they're writing it in stone.
Yes.
So the, you know, people can't, you know, to make it permanent. And some people say, yeah, but, you know, it was the start of writing. It wasn't. You know, all of the goddess temples, they could write, they could count, but they didn't do that with their stories.
Yes, right. Wow.
Right? Writing was for counting. This person brought that many things of grain in. This is our harvest this year. This is how much we have to share amongst the people. That's what writing was for. And it was only at the onset of the patriarchy that this writing, you know, to inform history. So from now on, this is how it is. That's, you know, that's also one of the reasons why I've gone out of my way not to be an academic, because it's all part of that rise of the patriarchal thinking, the value placed in the written word as truth. And what people say has and what people feel and how they communicate has less value than something that somebody bothers to write down.
Wow.
So, and then I was really, really busy for a long time with just the whole kind of witch thing. And then I met another woman who did a 7-year witches training with me but very kind of Dianic based, like in terms of, you know, the 4 elements and the 4 seasons and the wheel of the year, but also mixed in with astrology, but also card readings and that kind of stuff. Then when I got pregnant, I was like desperately unhappy. And I was like, okay, I made a deal with the goddess. I was like, okay, if you exist, I'll have a girl. And if what I'm thinking is all bollocks, I will have a boy. And if I have a boy, then I need to become a Christian, get a proper job, stop all this bullshit and find a husband to bring up my son, you know? And so when my daughter was born, I had her at home, and one of my mates, and I invited some mates over to the house, and one of my mates was standing there and went, "Oh my God, she's had a boy." It was the umbilical cord, luckily. She went, "Oh my God, she's had a boy." And then, you know, because that was the whole thing. So I was a bit like, you know, yeah, if it's a boy, I'm gonna just do as I've always been told, become a Christian, give it all up, find a husband, be a good person, blah, blah, blah. You know, and I just remember that feeling of my whole heart sinking. But I'd had this boy, you know, because I was like, I just, who wants to bring up a black man in this world? You know, who wants to bring a mixed heritage black man into this world? You know? Well, lots of like dodgy white women, obviously, but you know, I was like, this is too much. And then I realized it was a girl, and I was like, woohoo! You know, look, I was dreadful mother. Fuck that up as well. My daughter will tell you. However, you know, a fucked up daughter is not a danger to women or the planet.
Yes. I'm trying not to keep my opinion in, but I just want to say yes to that. Okay, I'm going to be quiet. I'm going to stop now.
It's fine. So after she was born, I was kind of a bit like, well, I need something to support me, you know, like I know I'm fucked in the head, really, you know, as they say in Dutch, niet goed wijs, which is not good wise, but you know, just like I need something. So I went looking. So I went to lots and lots of different Christian churches, and I was just, this is horrid. This is horrid. You know, just the whole notion that the creator, that the core being could be a man is so blatantly untrue. You know, I just know. And then I explored Islam. And when you talk to people who are really wise about Islam, then Allah is actually has no sex. You know, there's so much in it that's really, really beautiful. And I could really relate to when people, you know, this is what it is, this is what it means. And I was like, wow. And then I was a bit like, well, that's the theory, but the practice really fucking sucks. Right. And again, it's Frauenhaat, you know, women hate, it's misogynistic, you know. And then somebody would say to me, yeah, but heaven is under the feet of your mother. Right. And I'm like, look, men who were willing to kill people to get a virgin are deluded.
I've heard that.
No man in their right mind, no man who knows anything about sex or sexuality or sensuality wants to sleep with a virgin. Right? And men who do want to sleep with virgins, that is just a sign there's something wrong with your fucking head. No,
My
quick interest. Sorry, what were you saying?
I've got a quick question, like going on to this point about which faith do you feel or religion you feel might be better for women. So starting with your process with Christianity, I would say like maybe your biggest issue, and correct me if I'm wrong, with that is this whole teaching that we are inherently evil or wrong. So that started that, and that is in Christianity. You're not the first person that has told me that. And then now going on to you started studying with witches, I guess, and correct me if I'm wrong, was it male and female, or was it just women?
Always worked with women.
Okay, so, and now we're talking about Islam.
Where men were present. I went to rituals where men were present, but my teachers were always women, you know?
Right.
And what they were talking about is that if you look at when Christianity started, so you have, first of all, Judaism.
Right.
And if you look at Judaism, there is traces of that they've come from something, but you know, you have the Shekinah.
Yes.
Right? People are the guardians of the planet and not the rulers of the planet, you know? So you can see that they're taking a step away in a very determined direction.
Right.
But it's still really close to what they're coming from. So they have to pay lip service to it. Yeah? Then Christianity comes a little bit later, and there's they don't have to pay anywhere near as much lip service to the foundation that they've come from. So by the time you get to Islam, they're so far away with it. They're like, fuck all that, you know, positive women stuff. Do you know what I mean? Like, spread them, you know, that's, you know, and it's just, you know, like modern Islam creates safe space for women, but it's not, it's only safe because there's no men in it.
Right.
right? It's not
Right.
safe because it really honors them, but they do
Mm-hmm.
have an amazing, the one reason that I considered really for a long time being Muslim was because of the women's culture,
Mm-hmm. Hmm.
because there is that protected space for women, and women are
Hmm.
encouraged to educate themselves,
Wow.
and there are lots of benefits as a woman in that space. But basically, you only really get in there, and you only get any respect if you make sure you've got a man. And
Mm-hmm.
so again, I was a bit like that. And then I met Nichiren Daishonin's Buddhism.
Hmm.
And from the moment, so I was introduced to it by another Black woman.
Right.
Um, and I spent the first probably 5 or 6 years trying to find something wrong with it.
Buddhism?
Yeah, with Nichiren
Oh,
Buddhism.
oh, okay.
Nichiren Buddhism. So it's a very,
Right.
very specific strain. So it was
Okay.
started by now he started off as a poor man in 13th century Japan, and he came
Mm-hmm.
from the lowest level of families. So his family
Right.
were fisher people
Mm-hmm.
in a culture that didn't eat flesh.
Right.
So people who dealt in dead flesh were really the
Mm-hmm.
lowest of the low.
Mm-hmm.
And he was born at a time when there was just like lots of wars, loads of natural disasters, and he made
Right.
a determination. There has to be a way to make this world a better place, and I need to become the what is it, the smartest, the
Mm-hmm.
most educated person
Right.
in the world, i.e.
Okay.
Japan, so that I can work out how to make this better for me and my
Mm-hmm.
family, so that my
Wow.
family aren't suffering. And he then studied for about 20 years, read everything that was
Mm-hmm.
available, and came up with Nam Myoho Renge Kyo.
Uh-huh. I think
Yeah.
that's like a chant, right?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
So, on the basis of that, he wrote these like sacred, holy teachings, but most of them are letters that he sent to people. So the first
Mm-hmm.
thing I read was, it said, that basically everybody has the Buddha nature within them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And the easiest way, because we live in a world that is plagued by
Mm-hmm.
so many difficulties,
Right.
to bring people to enlightenment, which is the only,
Mm-hmm.
people have to be enlightened to create world peace. So the
Right.
basis of this is that we need world peace, and
Mm-hmm.
the world peace is only going to be achieved by individual effort.
Right.
And you need to get
Mm-hmm.
enough people who are willing to do that. But
Right.
to be able to do that, you have to believe in your Buddha nature. So he says, look, we are all, but as a way of saying it, manifesting gods. We can create
Mm-hmm.
anything we want to, but to be able to do that, we have to not only believe but know and operate from what he
Mm-hmm.
then called our Buddha nature.
Right.
So he said the easiest way to do that is you just call to it. So Nam
Mm-hmm.
Myoho Renge Kyo is a call and an order for your
Right.
Buddha nature to manifest in your life and draw other Buddhas to you. I'm
Okay.
like, I love this. And then in the first one of the writings that I ever read, he said, even people of incorrigible disbelief can attain enlightenment with this simple practice.
Hmm.
And I was like, that's me. you know
Mm-hmm.
wow, he's writing this for me. And then one of the third, like really very early on,
Mm-hmm.
there's another, they call them the Go Show, the Honorable Writings, and a
Right.
woman wrote to him and said to him, look, when I have my period, is it
Mm-hmm.
all right for me to practice? And he
Mm-hmm.
wrote back and said, look, your period is a natural part of your body. He
Mm-hmm.
said there is no two ways, that there's no doubt that the historical Buddha also had women
Mm-hmm.
disciples who traveled with him. So
Right.
basically, if you feel all right, you're not dirty when you have your period.
Right.
If you feel
Mm-hmm.
all right, it's like if you're having pain or you're not feeling very well, then
Mm-hmm.
no, you don't need to practice. But if you're
Right.
feeling good and it's all right to do it, then go for it. And the idea of this priest who in the
Mm-hmm.
13th century in Japan,
Wow.
writing that
Yes,
blew
that's
my mind.
wow.
Yeah.
It's blowing my mind.
Yeah.
Okay.
you know? And
Mm-hmm.
he says, it's a life philosophy. It's
Mm-hmm.
a religion because you have to practice it religiously.
Right.
Religiously, as in terms of, so re is again, and ligiere means to connect or to bind. So your religion
Right.
is something that you keep, that you repeat to
Mm-hmm.
connect you. Yeah.
Right. Does your practice have a name, or and does your practice have a name? Like, is it Wicca, Buddhism? I
It's,
know those two
well,
different
no.
things,
So
but
so there's two things. So there's I
right.
call it Gailanic. So
Okay.
Gailanic is a term that was invented by Rianne Eisler. She wrote a book called The Chalice and the Blade. So that
Okay.
means women-centered. Gynae, women.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Wow.
So yeah. So again, using the L from connection. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So Gailanic, woman-centered,
Mm-hmm.
earth-based worship.
Okay. Right.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And and I'm a Nichiren Buddhist.
Mm-hmm.
So his name, so he called himself Nichiren Daishonin.
Okay. Right. And so this answer is obvious because we kind of touched on it. Why both of your faiths are better for women. If you could talk a little bit about that, or a little bit more about that, because we touched on it a lot. But and what keeps coming up to me is the safety issue. Because when I hear you say women centered, I'm thinking that it's probably a lot safer than, you know, what I'm used to be honest, and a lot safer. Like when you mentioned in Islam, the women are safe because the men aren't present in their space. So that's pretty much what's coming into my mind, like the safety issue of why it might be better for women. So if you want to
It's
either confirm
interesting
or deny what I said. Mm-hmm.
that your focus is safety.
Mm-hmm.
Anything that excludes men is automatically going to be safer for
Yep.
women. That's a
Yep.
given. Like
Mm-hmm.
in terms of my Gailanic practice,
Mm-hmm.
I don't exclude men, but I don't
Right.
usually invite them, and
Right.
most of the stuff I do is for women
Mm-hmm.
only, just because, we've had 6,000 years of wedges being put between us.
Right.
We have so many barriers against us connecting with each other, which we do, you
Mm-hmm.
know. I spent some, when I was a young rad femme, a baby rad femme.
Mm-hmm.
I also was a political lesbian for a long time, and just spent huge amounts of time in women only company. And I remember the first time I did that for any extended period, I was like, there's something, it made me twitchy.
Right.
There was something, and I didn't know what it was. And it
Mm-hmm.
took me maybe a week to 10 days to suddenly go like, oh my God, there's no implicit threat of violence all around
Right.
me.
Right.
It is completely
Mm-hmm.
absent. Not that there's no rage, not that,
Mm-hmm.
but the chances of women being violent are
Mm-hmm.
so much less than with men. I mean, women
Yes.
rage at the drop of a hat.
Right.
When you spend time with women only, you also realize that even if somebody does get angry and punch you, they're
Mm-hmm.
not likely to break your jaw or
Right.
give you a concussion, you
Mm-hmm.
know. Just that absence of the implicit threat of violence was
Right.
mind blowing. And,
Mm.
the vast majority of women, especially heterosexual women, have
Mm-hmm.
never experienced that.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Yeah. So when they go to, lots of women are like, I'm not interested in a women's day or a women only this or a women only that. But
Mm-hmm.
mostly when they do, they're a bit like, they don't know what it is that gives them that light feeling,
Right.
and especially since, in the 21st century and third wave feminism, all of these cock allegiant
Mm-hmm.
women don't want to go anywhere without their man, don't exclude my
Right.
man, I want to bring my son, you've got to allow my son to come or whatever. And
Mm-hmm.
it's just like, you know until you've done it for an
Mm-hmm.
extended period of time, you have
Right.
no idea the
Right.
difference. And like for me, I think I'm really perceptive. It took
Mm-hmm.
me so long to realize what it was.
Right.
you know. And I remember like the penny really dropped when I came to America, because when I came to America for the first time, I was like, why am I scared?
Right.
Why am I scared all the time? That's just like, and America is a space that hums, is laden with the implicit threat of violence. And it's male
Yes.
violence. It's male
Yes.
pattern violence. Just because
Yes.
the women, you know, all of the women like, oh, well, I've got my gun, and it's and they, just, you know, like all the women who buy into that patterning, you know.
Very
And
true.
yeah, you know, somebody said to me, yeah, you know, I read a couple of things from Europe and it's all a bit namby-pamby. And I'm like, I like namby-pamby.
Right.
I like namby-pamby. You know, just this whole idea. I was talking to a really good girlfriend of mine. I kind of like the other day, I guess I was, you know how I get sometimes about the Americans. You know, you know,
Yes.
and my pain also, particularly at Black American culture, you know, which gets me raging and whatever. And I was a bit like, oh, there I go again, you know. I said to her, do you have a gun? And she said, you know, that she has this constant conversation with her partner. Something happens, and then they have this huge discussion. Should we, shouldn't we? Should we, shouldn't we? Should we, shouldn't we? And you know that, you know, we're all getting older, so they've actually, she said, you know, we keep coming back to, we're not having one in the house.
Right.
And in such a culture, I find that such a brave decision and admirable,
Yep.
you know. And I'm like, you need to leave that country and come here.
Right.
Come here.
Yeah.
Like, there are so many Americans moving into Amsterdam, and really, I fucking
Really.
hate it. I
Really.
hate it. Just because Americans grow up in a monoculture that they think is so diverse, and
Right.
they are cultural colonialists. You know, they come in and they want stuff to be like it is in America. You know, they
Right.
come over and they transplant
Mm-hmm.
that culture here. You know, so what is it? They
Mm-hmm.
have all of these groups, all of these expat groups
Right.
where
Right.
they
I
come
heard.
in and, you know, and it's like expatica, you know, all they're
Mm.
doing is trying to impose
Mm-hmm.
cultural norms that are actually really abhorrent,
Mm-hmm.
you know. Sorry, you know, like if you think of any, like food, you know, fat because I like food,
Right.
too much sugar in everything Americans make.
Mm-hmm. I noticed that with the
Too,
soft drinks here, and when I've traveled overseas, how much less sugar is in, let's say, a Coke or a Fanta when I was in either France or even DR. But here it's like sugar, the whole thing is sugar.
right? And you need to
Mm-hmm.
understand that sugar's massively addictive,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's also
Yeah.
a slave-based crop. To this day, the
Mm-hmm.
people who create sugar are in economic slavery. So
Mm-hmm.
having a nation the size of America addicted to the levels of sugar that you have means that every
Mm-hmm.
Black person who is basically undermining,
Mm-hmm.
attacking every other Black person who's enslaved to produce
Mm.
that crop,
Wow. Never thought about that. I never thought about that. Like how we're getting it.
right?
Wow.
So if you look at that from, so like the whole history of slavery, like basically the vast majority of slaves were actually, you know, people are going to shoot me when I say this, but had better lives because they had food, right? They
Mm-hmm.
might, you know, they had food, they had decent housing, they had clothing provided. So your vast majority of slaves across the world, in the Caribbean, in the Americas, had better basic life circumstances than your average um, uh, uh, working class, poor peasant European.
Hmm.
Conditions that your average European lived in at the time of slavery, they didn't, you know, were worse than on most
Hmm.
plantations. Nobody wants to address that. Nobody wants to look at that, you know?
I've never really looked into it, to be honest.
Right? You know, so in particular, like somewhere like the Netherlands, if you look at how their lowest class were treated, the conditions that they lived in, if you look at Dickensian England, and you know, if you look at France, and the conditions that led to the French Revolution, and then you know, every now and again you see these little things of like these little rows of houses with people in dresses, and no, they didn't have shoes, but they're not having winters like we did in Europe, like we do in Europe. You know?
Wow.
So, you know, when I'm looking at and I'm hearing Black Americans about how oppressed they are, and I'm like, I'm not saying you guys didn't have it shitty. You did. But the space that you've come to on the basis of that is really ill-informed. You know? Like they captured working class, like peons, the indentured, the serfs of Europe by giving them tea and sugar and tobacco. And it's because they made them addicted to those substances that they were allowed to do the slave trade. So I come from the country where people went, this has to stop. You know, Black people are people, you know, the British were the first to end the slave trade. And that was a call from ordinary people going, we're not having this.
Right.
You know, right. The Dutch imported very few slaves to this country, very few. The British imported way more. And as soon as they interacted with ordinary people, and ordinary people were like, this is a person just like me.
Right.
You know, that's where that came from. So the whole history, the whole way that people are treated, you know, like every Black person in America has white British people to thank for the end of slavery.
Well, I got in trouble one day. I said, you know what, could this have been, we have been better off had the United States remained a colony, a British colony, thinking about what you said, they ended the slave trade, or, you know, way before the United States did.
You know, and we're paying it off until the beginning of this century. They were like, this has to end by any means necessary.
Yes.
You know? So, but the reason I started that point is that it's like, so you get people to disengage their humanity or their human feel for other people by addicting them to a substance.
Right. Wow.
Right. When you have an addiction, whether it's coffee, whether it's tea, whether it's sugar, whether it's chocolate, because those are the four main addictions. Yeah. And then it doesn't matter what happens to people as long as you get your fix.
Wow, that's sad. I kind of like, here's the thing. I'm the type that I'll start thinking about that when I consume those things. And I'm glad, because I need to get off that stuff anyway. I'm making progress, but I will definitely think about that. And thank you for giving me something to think about, you know, because it's not worth someone in slave conditions.
Yeah, that's what you're doing. You know, it's like you're enslaving other people with your addiction.
Right.
Right. No, they are all cash crops, which means that people are paid unfairly to be able to produce them at a price that people here expect to be able to pay for it.
Right.
Yeah. And the whole thing is they addict people from childhood. So that whole thing about, you know, no breast milk. Breast milk is sweet, but formula is sweeter.
There goes that addiction, getting them addicted.
You know? Like from dot.
Right.
You know,
wow.
I once traveled with a group of people. We went to east behind the just before the wall came down when I was really quite young, and the coffee ran out. Right.
Wow.
So if you've ever been in a bus with 50 coffee addicts with no coffee,
you should have seen me this morning before my coffee.
Right, exactly. So that's another one that they've got you at. But the whole coffee trade is based in iniquity.
Yes.
Right? People are underpaid for it. Coffee used to grow and be harvested the whole year round. They changed the crop so that they have a coffee harvesting season, so that so they can pay people less. and
Mhm.
have them as, seasonal workers, but they're
Wow.
enslaved seasonal workers. The oldest
Wow.
coffee tree is in Ethiopia, and basically, it's like the first thing the colonizers and the capitalists did. We used to trade. Look, I have this and you have that, and
Mhm.
we'll swap for it. And you have this and I
Wow.
have that, and we'll swap for it. So they took all of those crops, they took all of those
Mhm.
things that they wanted to make money from, and they took them to other people's places, which immediately cut out all of those small traders.
Wow. So I do
Sorry.
apologize for my viewers. We did go off on a tangent, an interesting tangent. But my last
Sorry.
it's okay. I do the same thing. My last two things.
Wait, let me just
Do you
really quickly. So number 3 was, how has your faith benefited you? So the bottom line
yes.
is
Mm-hmm.
that both of these practices
Mm-hmm.
are about understanding your power as an individual.
Right.
So the basis of both of them is, if you know that
Mm-hmm.
anything material you can just create for yourself, what do you
Right.
focus your energy on? Then the
Mm-hmm.
idea is that basically you then focus your energy on being and doing good for others.
Right.
Yeah. So
Mm-hmm.
once you know I can have anything I want at any time I want, material, physical, right? I can
Mm-hmm.
create material happiness by focusing my will, whether it's by
Right.
Namyo Horenge Kyo or whether it's by magic,
Mm-hmm.
and ritual in either of those cases. So then what more is there for me as a human being to do? Well, then
Mm-hmm.
I want everybody else to be aware of this too.
Right.
That's how you create world peace, by
Right.
people going, I don't need to fight you for that, because whatever you've got, I
Right.
can just get for myself, right?
Mm-hmm.
You can live here too, because I don't, you know what I mean? And that's the
Yes.
basis of both of them. And the
Wow.
reason that I think they're better for women is because I think, like, all of the stuff that I'm saying about how we've been enslaved, right? That's
Right.
also part of the whole religious thing.
Mm-hmm.
That's what Christianity did. It went to these
Mm-hmm.
places. The priests were used to steal people, to open up
Mm-hmm.
the bartering, which wasn't bartering, to open up trade. Priests were
Right.
used to open up trade, to bring
Mm-hmm.
stuff back for the Vatican and blah, blah, blah. So all of
Right.
that is about separating people from their manifesting powers. That
Right.
is about taking people away from their sense of, like, I don't say that women are goddesses. I say that we are
Right.
the embodiment, right?
Okay.
We are the representations of what the goddess means and is on this planet, right?
Mm-hmm.
We don't need
Okay.
to be in competition with each other,
Wow.
right?
Wow.
What we need to come together with
Mm-hmm.
each other, understand each of our powers so that we have power with, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And 3 women can be any man at anything, but
Yes.
because most women are smaller, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
so all they have to do is make sure that we're operating in our
Mm-hmm.
own tiny little cells and not connected to each other, and then they
Right.
can do what the fuck they like with us. As soon as we come together
Yes.
and define for ourselves, what is it that makes me happy? What do I want? What do I need? Blah,
Mm-hmm.
blah, blah. And it's just like, like, you want to shag a man, you bring him in. You
Mm-hmm.
don't go to his space, you bring him to your space. And the
Right.
whole sex discussion, which is where we started,
Mm-hmm.
in goddess religion, sex is sacred. So the
Mm.
whole thing about the patriarchy is that it's taken us and it's said that, sex is something that you do privately with just
Mm-hmm.
one man and just one woman. Whereas in
Right.
actual fact, the most powerful energy, pure energetic force on the planet is the female orgasm.
Hmm.
So think how many women there are who don't orgasm.
Because they're with
Because whatever reason.
they're with men.
So,
Let
but
me stop. Let me stop.
so you would have these ceremonies, and the
Mm-hmm.
only term we have for it now is like an orgy, but you would have these ceremonies, and the whole point was that all the people come together, and it's
Mm-hmm.
like, what do we need for the next year? We need good weather, we need great
Right.
sunshine. So it's just yesterday was then the solstice. So then you would come
Mm-hmm.
together at the solstice. The point, the sun is at this point, it's now the longest day. We
Mm-hmm.
celebrate the ability to create pleasure. The
Wow.
clitoris has one function, pleasure. It's the
Yes.
only thing on the human, but one function, just
Mm-hmm.
pleasure. So you take that space and it's like, okay, as a group, we are focused and we need this for our community. We need that for our community. And anybody
Mm-hmm.
who's done sex magic knows that when you like, this is what I want, you send out your pure desire. That's
Mm-hmm.
you send out your pure desire, but as a group, you do that,
Mm-hmm.
and female orgasm is actually the battery that kicks that out into that space. So you're in a
Wow.
space with all of your best girlfriends,
Mm-hmm.
and some bloke says, I want to fuck you up the ass. And
Mm-hmm.
and your girlfriend, and your girl, you're like, and your girlfriends are like, ain't fucking happening, mate.
Right. Right.
Like
Mm-hmm.
when you having sex with your girlfriends around you, you're completely safe.
Mm-hmm.
But
Wow.
we've been conditioned to think in such a way that it's that leaves us victim to these men,
Mm-hmm.
that leaves us in competition
Yes.
with these men. And I say
Mm-hmm.
things like, it stands to reason, if a good man is rare, then it
Mm-hmm.
should be obvious that a good man is to share.
Interesting.
Like I have my partner because
Mm-hmm.
one of my best friend at the time had a short fling with him. It went completely pear-shaped. And I said to her, that's it, I'm done with men. I'm not,
Mm-hmm.
I'd always been a bit bisexual, always had a bit of things with women. And basically
Mm-hmm.
I stopped sleeping with women because I'm like, I'm so fucked in the head. I'm not going to be able to do good relationships with women either. I can't do
Mm-hmm.
good relationships,
Right.
because all of that stuff is in me,
Mm-hmm.
And my girlfriend said to me, I said, look, that's it. I'm not doing this anymore. I'm really, men
Mm-hmm.
just there, And she said, look, I think it's really important. She said, what I wish for you is that before you give up men, I totally get it. Yes, it's a good thing to do. She said,
Mm-hmm.
I just had a fling with this bloke. He's really cool. You two are
Mm-hmm.
so different, it's going to be massively short-lived, but at least you're going into women with a good feeling rather than, with taking this
Because
like
yeah.
negative. And that's just a much
Right.
better place to be at. And I was like, good idea. And
Mm-hmm.
25 years later, I'm still with him.
Wow.
And and we have this, like, we laugh,
Yes.
because yes, we're both kind of like bisexual, but
Mm-hmm.
it's just a bit like, oh, well, how does that work? I'm like, it's my last man,
Right.
yeah. So, and it's really weird
It
to
was meant
say,
to be, I guess.
but
25
it's
years.
very,
Mm-hmm.
like, we're together because we make each other laugh and we have a lot of fun,
Right.
and
Mm-hmm.
that's been true for 25 years.
Wow. That's great. That's great. That's
Yeah.
wonderful. It really is.
But then if you ask me, I'm like, yeah, but actually, I'm a lesbian, really. But
Mm-hmm.
it's like, but you're not, are you?
Right. Right. So, anything, it's time to, your
one
plug.
thing that you said is that what are the negatives in terms of what I do?
Right.
So yeah, that was another one of your questions, right? So there are
Yes.
two negatives. Like, in terms of practicing Nichiren Daishonin Buddhism, very often it's attached to an organization. And at the moment, I have not, I mean, I'm in the process of starting a group that I want to call either the Association of the Practitioners of Nichiren Daishonin Buddhism, or people who chant Nam-myoho Renge Kyo,
Right.
because that is about focusing on what he wrote, which is mind-boggling, and chanting Nam-myoho Renge Kyo to create world peace, with the power of our voice, with this coming together thing. But around religions, the institutions that form are just a massive problem.
Right.
So
yes.
I reject those mostly. And the same thing with witchcraft. It's like, the way that I've been taught is that the information is passed on one-to-one and you create your practice. But when people set up these systems where they're like, I'm gonna, a hierarchical system of passing on knowledge, that's where it goes wrong.
Yeah. So yeah, these hierarchies.
My faith benefited me by bringing me shit, like, I chanted for this house, I chanted for my partner, like, so I wrote a list of the things that I wanted. No, first of all, I chanted like a million daimoku, And then I wrote down exactly what I wanted in a relationship. And then I
Wow.
planted 1,000,000 daimoko and he appeared, you know,
Wow.
planted for this house that I live in, ground floor with a garden in
Wow.
middle of Amsterdam, you know. But the whole thing with Nichiren Daishonin is Buddhism. They say, look, you chant for stuff. And when you get the stuff that you chant for, then you know that all of the other stuff must be true. That's how you know it's true, right?
Wow.
Decide on the shit that you want, get the shit that you want, and then be the Buddha in your daily life.
Yep. Wow. This is really eye-opening. Really eye-opening. I'm so glad we had this conversation. So is there anything that you like? Do you have a website or anything that you have that you'd like to?
Well, you know, there's lots of, so a lot of my stuff it's about, you know, my practice is aimed at supporting women. So I'm a therapist,
Okay.
you know, lots of different healing modalities.
Right.
You know, I'm working on like, so at the moment, my sort of like my magic superpower is creating individual guided meditations for people.
Okay.
I've been doing quite a lot of that, so you can get them recorded or just a one-off. I do sliding rates for women. My website, which is it's a bit of a mess because you know I am, is maximcnaughty.nl.
Right. And the links will be posted in the description.
And I make a range of natural products. So I do like, I have a holistic practice, which means that I'm talking therapies, but I also do massage for people who were present. But I also then create, like, I guess they're called cosmetics, you know, with CBD and essential oils.
Wow.
Yeah.
Right. So I would encourage you all to visit Maxi's websites and to really, really learn from her. I'm so happy that we got to meet. I've seen you on Feminist Question Time, and I just felt I've got to get to know her. And I'm glad that we got to know each other. Seriously.
You know, I've enjoyed our times in the groups, and I really like that we don't always agree, but that we learn so much from each other, and there's just this space, you know, of connection. You know, so I'm on I'm on Instagram, Maxi McNaughty, McNaughty the Maxi. My products are LoveQuotabeauty, and I'm also on Facebook. What is it? Maxi McNaughty.
Right. Okay. Thank you so much. I really enjoyed this, and I know our viewers will enjoy it too. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you for asking me.
Okay.